Welcome to MAP, the bi-weekly market access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. Mars makes it as easy as possible for you to get your pharmaceutical, medtech, or digital health product to the market and, of course, get the price it deserves. My name is Stefan Walzer. I'm the founder of Mars and a health economist by training and working in the fields of market access, reimbursement, pricing, and health economics already since 2004. Additionally, I have founded the consultancy P&N Pricing and Negotiations in Healthcare based in Toronto, Canada, which supports companies and individuals globally by coaching, simulations, and training, especially on negotiations. This service is including our innovative virtual reality simulation program and is part of the Negotiation Lab. And now let's learn about the market access and reimbursement systems around the globe. Good. So welcome to our next Market Access podcast episode. Together with our good friend Paul-Lukas Hoffschmidt. You are a specialist, I would say, for the US, even though that you are, I think, located in Germany. So maybe Paul-Lukas, maybe just quickly introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you're really doing.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Stefan, for having me on the pod today. So my name is Paul, and I'm the founder and CEO of Alpha Sophia, and we are a commercial intelligence software and data company. And as you mentioned, we are currently specialized and mainly focused on the US healthcare market. That being said, our clients are basically located all over the world. So everyone who's looking to go towards the US, try to commercialize there in the medtech, pharma, biotech, health tech sector could be a potential partner of our company. And we usually help them to be more efficient, more targeted in their go-to-market approach when it comes to developing and steering comprehensive marketing campaigns, especially towards healthcare providers, but also along the value chain of adjacent go-to-market steps.
Perfect. I think that was quite crisp. And I think it shows already, let's see, where you are coming from. So I guess maybe we start a bit, let's say, before going, I think you mentioned already a bit go-to-market, commercialization, success, etc., which is probably on one end of the side. So maybe we start a bit earlier. And
Sure.
What is your opinion? I mean, how would and could HCPs, clinicians, healthcare professionals influence maybe the commercial success of new healthcare products? Obviously, we focus on the US today. So what are the kind of drivers why obviously you would think it would make sense, for example, to collaborate with you, but just in general, I mean, if, for example, a startup is coming up with a great idea and just start thinking about going to the market?
I think it's a great question. I think when it comes to innovation in general, so developing new products, but also then commercial success later down the road. And what does commercial success mean? It actually only means bringing the innovation actually out to the end users, to the patients, and bringing it into implementation. I think it's always a great start to think backwards, to basically start with the patient who has an indication and then go backwards towards ultimately the developer of a new medical device or pharmaceutical solution. And when you go backwards, of course, the first natural step is the clinician, the practitioner, who's in direct contact with that patient and is taking care of their care journey. So ultimately, the clinician, of course, plays the most central role when it comes to making a new medical innovation a success. And that can have multiple play forms, right? It's not only the clinician being the person who's the ultimate, let's call it customer of a medical innovation. The person who implements it in therapy, but also quite often clinicians are innovators on their own. They're in so close contact to patients, especially in medical device, that many innovations in the medical device and medtech industry are actually originate from clinicians who have seen something in their day-to-day practice and then partner up with medical device teams to bring something new out and develop something new.
I agree. You mentioned already, let's say, clinicians are basically kind of innovators themselves, especially in the medtech area. I fully agree. I mean, when we think about, let's say, even still a bit broadly, you also mentioned pharma, so pharma and medtech. I mean, I personally also think that obviously it would make sense to also involve clinicians really even early on in the process when such innovations are maybe just in the early stages of development. I think for pharma, I think that's quite standard. What do you think is, or should maybe be done when having a medtech product, especially in those early days?
Yeah, I think I mean, what we see quite often, and I think that's best practice, that medical device companies really early on, either they already have a clinician co-founder who's an innovator, who's the inventor, maybe herself. But if that's not the case, I think it's just best practice to have a medical advisory board right from the beginning with clinicians who could be end users of the product to have the feedback loop from practice quite early on and do that. I think especially in medical device, it actually occurs more often that innovations are coming from clinicians as well. Whereas in pharma, where the innovation is more done in a lab, it's more usually coming from a research background or from a pure lab background being conducted at a commercial company. Especially in medical device, when we think, for example, about, I don't know, let's make a case about orthopedics, for example. You have an orthopedic surgeon who's performing a certain type of procedure a lot of times. Maybe, I don't know, he's doing 100, 200 total knees per year. This person is so knowledgeable about those procedures, maybe has tried several different implant products over the course of the last years, has seen the advantages and disadvantages, has seen the complications that can occur in certain derivative indications and so on, and then can, of course, be a really good source for ideas, for brainstorming, and then ultimately for innovation when it comes to improving existing products or developing a new device or new technique to actually deliver that therapy to a patient.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes also a lot of sense. I think you mentioned also ad board or other kind of techniques, if I want to call it like that. I mean, when thinking about the US, I mean, the US is obviously huge. I mean, it's so big. I mean, it's basically various countries in one big country, right? So
yeah, one statistic which really always breaks my mind, if you would say the US market, if the US healthcare market would be an economy, it would be the third largest economy in the world, just larger than Germany. So the whole US healthcare market is bigger than the whole German economy, including, I don't know, everything we do here, including driving cars and having a beer in the afternoon. Yeah, that's quite insane, and that also explains the focus all medical device and pharma companies have on the US market. Also, given that, I don't know, the US market maybe is 40% of the world healthcare market, but then because margins are bigger, I mean, people always say it's something like 60% of all profits in medtech and pharma in the world are being generated in the US. So of course, it's Champions League to win that market and have a strong positioning in that market early on.
Exactly. No, I fully agree. I think, I mean, when you speak about Champions League, it's always the question, I mean, how to select the right, let's say, team members, right? And I mean, what is your secret? I mean, I know that you have that kind of great database with a lot of different parameters or correlated variables. I mean, what is the kind of secret to select the right kind of, let's say, pool of physicians if I'm a startup company or whatever kind of company, but I want and need to move over, obviously, to the US for the reasons you just mentioned?
Yeah, maybe I start one step further by just giving a few sentences about what the platform is we've actually built. So our company, Alpha Sophia, our platform, and you can check it out on alphasophia.com. It's basically a software platform solution, which it feels a little bit like using LinkedIn or Facebook or any other social network, just with the difference that we don't have users on there, but just a lot of data on all the healthcare providers on the US. And what we did, we've data on almost 3 million healthcare providers in the US, and we make that pool of providers sliceable and diceable along multiple dimensions. Yeah, so you can do stuff like, okay, show me all orthopedic surgeons who perform a certain amount of, I don't know, hip replacements per year in the oncology subspace, who are located in Texas, who in the past have never cooperated with one of your competitors, let's say, I don't know, Stryker, for example, and who are actively on LinkedIn so that you might be able to run a marketing campaign towards them on LinkedIn, for example. Yeah? And then bang, you end up with that really small and tiny subset of providers drilled down from the 3 million maybe to only 200, and then you can target them in a really precise manner. Yeah? And that helps medical device companies when they roll out their products to really focus on those providers who could be early adopters in the beginning, or could be key opinion leaders to spread the word about their product, or then later on the ones who have higher volumes maybe, and then bring that out into the masses. So that's what we've built, and we work with dozens of medical device companies now in the world, helping them in their commercial journeys. And to come back to your questions, who to select, what are the ideal providers? I think I touched that a little bit in my answer previously, but it really depends on the stage. So you might be pre-commercial. So you might be actually using a platform like ours or data in general, to find providers who can be sources of inspiration, early feedback givers for prototypes. You might use it at a later stage to do your recruiting for clinical studies. To find the right providers with the right patient cohorts behind them to conduct your clinical studies. And then later on, when you actually get a regulatory approval, hit the market, you want to find those first early adopters who are more prone to using innovation early on and trying out new products. And then later on, you want to across the chasm, as they say, and break into the mass market and bring it out to everyone. So to answer your question, it really depends on the stage. And the beauty of data is either there are data points which directly point you to the right people. So you might find, if you're just looking for the ones who are the top billers, then you can use our platform to find the ones who are performing a certain procedure the most amount of times, for example. Or you're looking for more innovative people. So you might use proxies like, have they engaged using innovative products in the past? Are they at research institutions which are associated with a certain discipline, a certain therapeutic area, and so on? So there are either data points which directly direct you in a direction, or they could also be proxies. So you might. One example, which is always fun, for example, in our platform, you can search for providers who are doing telehealth. And then some people ask me, I'm not selling a telehealth solution. Why do I care about that? And then I'm saying, yeah, that's true. But the people who register for telehealth are probably in general at the moment more innovative than the ones who don't. So even if you're selling something else, those might still be great first people to speak to convince them to give your product a try, because you're still the underdog, unknown. You haven't proven that your product is actually working consistently. So maybe go out to them and they have a bit higher chance of actually convincing them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's it's a very good example. I think with that kind of proxy, fully agree with that. So I mean, if I get you correct, I mean, that kind of information can always be used, let's say, from the early stages, obviously helping, let's say, getting the product to the market for a pharma product, maybe rather kind of advisory board or expert kind of, let's say, table down to the clinical trials. The same with MedTech, obviously, even with some further input into the, let's say, design of the product itself, down to the point of preparing commercialization, but also later on probably for distribution planning and the like, right? I mean, key account management and so on.
Definitely. I mean, especially in later stages, customers will use our platform quite often to just do pipeline estimations. In which territories do we have which amounts of procedures? So how do I cut my territories so that they are not equal in geographic size, but equal in opportunity size, for example? To do total market estimations. So how big is the market of a certain procedure, and so on. It's actually quite a long use case chain that is being served by an intelligence solution like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's quite interesting. Absolutely. Just generally, I mean, because you have, let's say, quite good experience in, let's say, collaborations between HCPs and the industry, do you see any kind of changes in the past, or maybe anticipate even any kind of changes in terms of that kind of landscape with respect to, let's say, collaboration, especially in the US? It's getting more tricky. Are physicians maybe getting more difficult to work with, or is it maybe even the opposite? What is your kind of feeling from the last years?
Yeah, so I think the big question always is how do you get the attention of those busy doctors? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's getting harder and harder. And if you look at statistics, just for, sales reps time spent with providers, this average time is decreasing and decreasing. I think just read a study recently where it's something like, a provider, when they talk to a sales rep, on average, they only spend 3 minutes with them. So it's quite a small amount of time where this sales rep actually has to be able to make his sort of a point and to position the innovation he has in his back. Secondly, especially during COVID, it was even harder to get access to physicians. It was harder for sales associates to get into the hospitals and speak to them and so on. And that has, I think, caused a few. I mean, it has made things harder. I think it's gotten better over the course of the last 2 years again. But then it also has opened up further channels. So engaging with healthcare providers through social media, for example, has increased in frequency. And we see customers having more success using those paths in recent times. That's, for example, one thing you can also do on our platform. You can see, I don't know, who's on Twitter, who's on Instagram, who's on LinkedIn, and so on, and use those channels to get in touch with healthcare providers. But there is no silver bullet. It was always hard, and it's always going to be hard to get in touch with those doctors. And you have to be creative and, first of all, have a great product which sparks interest, and then find innovative ways to get in touch with those providers.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. I mean, what do you think about maybe kind of, let's say, stepwise approach to involve even the kind of broader audience of clinicians? I think with the top, let's say, key opinion leaders, I think that's the normal kind of way to go, right? But I think I think with them, it's maybe, I don't know whether it's really getting harder or more difficult, or whether it was always, because everybody wants to obviously get them involved. But what about, I mean, if I started to early on have the top guys involved up front, and then basically try to, let's say, involve even more. I mean, commercially, it's also difficult because obviously, let's say the revenues are just coming in when the product is on the market. And any kind of thoughts on that, or maybe other kind of approaches companies could follow?
I think you always have to break into the first rooms. And as soon as you have some first cheerleaders for your solution, then I think a good way is always to follow those customers. So you could do stuff like, you have first few surgeons who like your product. So check out what their alma mater is, and try to target other providers who went to the same alma mater. Use testimonials for them. Associate that with the alma mater. It has a much higher likelihood of those other providers also jumping on the train and having a look. So I don't know, using basically breaking in and then following the network of those first cheerleaders is, I think, always a good path to distributing in an transparent and difficult to reach network. I think that's it's always going to be a hustle to get in, and especially, I mean, startups, smaller companies, they can't rely on a sales force like, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson, or I don't know, other big medtech and pharma companies have, where they basically have a sales rep in every city who walks into every hospital every other day, and they maybe only have, I don't know, at the beginning, a few sales people and marketing people, and the advice would be targeted. Don't waste your marketing and sales budgets on potential customers that don't convert. So do your research, find out who's actually a good fit. Try to pre-qualify before you start spending a lot of money. Find out which providers might also already be blocked by your competitors. So you can check out, I don't know, in the US, for example, you can use data from the Sunshine Act to see who has been on a lot of dinners with your competitors already. So he's probably unlikely to cooperate with you, and so on. So I think there can be a lot of efficiency be gained if you just do your research and be targeted in your approach.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that makes, again, a lot of sense. I mean, just out of your experience, I mean, just while you were speaking about as well about alma mater, etc. I mean, obviously we know that people are moving from one state to the other, from one area to the other. But are there kind of generalizabilities around regions or states which maybe should firstly be, let's say, targeted, especially if I don't have maybe millions of dollars available for a big kind of marketing campaign? I mean, I know that some people are saying maybe focus a bit more, I don't know, on Massachusetts and California and wherever, or is it rather where you would say, US is big, it anyway depends, which is probably true, but are there any kind of general trends where you say those states should always be followed maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's as you said, it's hard to say, and it always depends on the perspective. If you're a European company jumping over to the US, it might be beneficial for you to start on the East Coast just because operationally it's easier. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, being in hubs where there are big cities with a lot of people, with big hospitals, a lot of procedures ultimately might make sense to have a lot of potential cases in the area where you start. But then I just recently did call with another company who was like, for their therapeutic area, they were like, the Midwest is actually the best area to start because competition is a bit lower there, for example, and so on. And it also, I mean, in the US, it has to depend in when it comes to reimbursement. Maybe you have some first deals with insurances to get reimbursement first, and so on, then you might want to go into an area where those insurances are quite dominant. I wouldn't want to answer that question generally, but it depends on who you are, and it's basically you have to weigh in your operational expenses for the location you choose versus the amount of potential that is in this area, and it also depends on how you actually distribute. What do you own? Do you do marketing and sales completely in-house, or on your own, hire your own salespeople? Or do you, I don't know, do marketing inside and maybe also inside sales, but then have outside sales outsourced to distributors who already have contacts to potential providers? And that opens a lot of opportunity, but also a whole set of new problems, because then you have to take care about, are those distributors actually rightly incentivized? Yeah, when they go out. I mean, they usually have, I don't know, 10 products in their bag. They go to a provider, only have those 3 minutes I talked about earlier. Which product are they going to pitch? Yeah, so it's like, it's an incentive problem. Are they going to the right providers or to the ones they actually already know, and so on? So it's, all those things create a lot of opportunity, but also not a problem, but challenges. And you have to be. It's always good to have at least to be at par on a knowledge side about your target customers, so that you can create checks and balances for all strategies that you develop and ultimately implement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked as well about the last couple of minutes, always about, let's say, pharma and or medtech and all of the kind of, let's say, potential approaches. What are the kind of key difference from your perspective when, let's say, commercialize a product, especially when thinking also about, again, the use or the utilization, probably better, of healthcare professionals in the US? Are there big differences, or is it rather, let's say, the approach is still quite similar? It's just another kind of product what the company has basically in their hands.
You mean a different approach depending on the type of product, or on the type of Europe versus US, or type of product?
No, I was more thinking about the different types of products.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it depends on, I mean, it even starts with the regulatory path. Yeah, do you have a completely new product, or is it a 501(k) approval where it's more like a Me Too product with slight improvements and so on? And it also depends on how high volume the product is. Is it for rather rare diseases, or is it a volume product, and so on? I think it's actually one of the hardest questions in the beginning to figure out how you set up your sales operations and how you get the steepest initial traction curve, which then probably unlocks more funding for more sales and marketing resources and so on. I'd always recommend just playing through all scenarios for your company and your product, and really being diligent about that, and definitely also talking to distributors about their experiences. That definitely gives you feedback about your product, because they are, I mean, ultimately a customer as well. So they decide if they want to spend resources or not, and that gives you great feedback about what other people think about the commercialization of your product. But then also, I think it's always good to at least own a little bit of your distribution yourself, because it just brings you closer to the customer and creates a better feedback loop for what to improve, not only in further product iterations down the road, but also in your sales and marketing approach. And then you can iterate faster and control everything from the beginning. And then you might, I don't know, work with further distributors later on in the future. So I think actually the hybrid model in the beginning can be quite efficient, where you do some of the sales and sales yourself, but then also work with distributors maybe in more rural areas or in areas you can't cover in the beginning. And then you can cross-pollinate from both experience, from the ones you're doing yourself and the ones you're getting from the distributors, and A/B test your way to a most efficient setup.
Got you. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you also just mentioned beforehand the difference between Europe and the US. Anything important to share from that perspective as well?
I'm actually not a big expert on Europe, so you probably have to weigh in a little bit as well. But what we definitely see, what's definitely different, is just the reimbursement market, and also the willingness to spend in the US healthcare market. And that, of course, also creates a lot of competition. But at the same time, if you have a superior product which delivers a higher patient value at the same or lower price, then you can definitely unlock a lot of resources also in the US. And also when it comes to funding, if you're growing further and further, at some point medical device companies usually also have to go over the Atlantic and talk to American investors who just often have bigger pockets to then fund the further growth of a company.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things would I generally would say, I think US, or let's say generally the US market is probably even more open for innovation. I don't know whether you share that, but I would generally say I think that's probably true for patients, for physicians, but also for payers in general.
Yeah, I would agree. That's also my perception. At least the feedback I also get from our customers, especially the ones, especially the European customers who are commercializing in the US.
Yeah,
it's exactly. Also, I'm just recently, I'm not an expert in that field, but I'm recently hearing quite a lot that, for example, Swiss companies actually go through the FDA approval process first before they go through their domestic ones, because it seems to be faster at the moment, which I found quite interesting. So there are different paths of actually entering the US market. It doesn't have to be the second market. Sometimes it can also be the first market, even though you're located in Europe.
Exactly.
And you're more, maybe you can say a few words about your perspective on that, but I think that's also a period where you need to be really diligent. In which country do you actually go first, and where do you go second, and how do you do that?
No, I fully agree. I mean, I think important is probably as well what you said early on, right? I mean, yes, the US is the biggest market. With all of this, let's say, possible, or let's say opportunities, but also the kind of pitfalls, right? I mean, obviously, if you want to focus on the US, you need to have a very good and thorough kind of planning, and obviously as well the budget and the resources to really then, let's say, serve the market, right? Also from a marketing perspective, I think. I mean, we have also seen, let's say, clients with, I think, a really good product, but they weren't really that commercially successful because I think the US market was probably just too big for them, and they haven't really planned appropriately. So that's, again, I think what we as well said probably in the last couple of minutes. Whereas in Europe, on the other hand, you have most of the times, especially the kind of issues with, let's say, different and sometimes even very difficult reimbursement processes. Maybe we can also discuss about prices, right? If those are appropriate or not. I mean, that's maybe as well debatable, but I think in general, I think, it probably depends. I mean, where to best go. I agree. It doesn't necessarily need to be always, let's say, a or different markets in Europe, even that you are maybe firstly and primarily located out of Europe. You could also, let's say, firstly target the US. But at the end of the day, independent, you need a very thorough planning, and then need to as well execute the plan appropriately.
Exactly.
No, I agree. Last question, probably. If you would, let's say, speak to a company in Europe, startup or not startup, doesn't really matter, and they would ask you for the 3 key recommendations in order to be commercially successful in the US, what would those be from your perspective?
So I think as the market is so different, it requires to have some local partners who know the market really well right from the beginning, and team up with them, and get someone really experienced at an early stage when you actually go over. And that's just important to don't make any really costly mistakes, because everything in the US in the healthcare market, whatever you do, it costs a lot of money. So avoiding mistakes is just super critical, especially if you have limited resources as a startup company, for example. So get experienced people in that market on board, and then really do market research. Look at data, segment your market, be precise about who you want to target first, who you want to target second, what your sales pitch is, and then start in a small nucleus, as you mentioned earlier. Maybe find one territory, one area. Let's say you might start in Florida in a certain area, and then try to get some first early adopters. Win them as cheerleaders for your product. Win them that they commit to maybe promoting your product, and then going step by step further out. So this would be my key recommendations. And don't try to win the whole US on day one. So go step by step, have small wins, use those small wins to convince further people, and then have a kind of roll-up effect as you go through the market.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think especially maybe the last kind of point, don't don't have probably the big US directly upfront in your mind when thinking about being commercially successful, probably really plan it step by step. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, no, perfect. Paul, thanks a lot for your time, for your insights. I think that was really great. I think a lot what I learned as well. And obviously all the best as well for you and the company in the future, and hope to talk to you soon.
Stefan, it was great being on the pod, and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you. So another great episode on our Market Access podcast, at least from my perspective. And today, probably with a slightly different focus. I mean, we're speaking always, let's say, about reimbursement, market access, etc. And of course, we always have, let's say, commercial success in our minds. But ultimately, not only in the US, but everywhere in every different kind of healthcare market, the healthcare professionals, the clinicians, the prescribers are key in order to bring innovation then to the patients. Not only that, in a lot of countries and also in some of the regions and states in the US, obviously healthcare providers are very important in order to get into discussion with payers. Payers want to understand if and what a product can really deliver and what kind of patient impact it could have, and also to understand the results of a clinical trial for their local or regional kind of environment. So having said that, it is important, obviously in the US, but also in other areas of the world, to have healthcare professionals early on involved. I think we have discussed about a couple of different things, and sometimes it might even make sense to probably have clinicians and payers in the same discussions, maybe in the same room, for example, through advisory boards, even in the early stages. Understanding how a clinical study should look like, how a product should be developed, with which kind of features, but also, let's say, and of course, with which kind of features what payers are looking for. Not only patient, physicians, but then also the payers. We have really discussed a lot today, but I just thought maybe bring that as well into perspectives in the last words of the podcast. So ultimately, if you want and need further kind of insights on the US market, I think Alpha Sophia is a really great tool and could be used greatly in conjunction with our artificial intelligence platform, Max Insights, which gives you the insights into the payer world. With Max Insights, our artificial intelligence tool and platform for the payer planning. So it's a great, nice kind of collaboration, and please reach out if you need anything further. That was an episode of MAP, the Market Access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. MAP is available every second week with a new episode, so watch out. And in case you might have questions, contact me directly and or visit our website on www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de.